we are doing not just ourselves a disservice when we don't lead with boldness. We do the world a disservice because the world needs a strong church.
Yeah.
Period. So Sunday at the church, we had The Chosen. Did you end up going to that?
Yeah.
Yeah. How was it?
I thought it was awesome. The first 2 episodes.
Yeah. Season 4?
Season 4, 1 and 2. We're getting into, well, the kids are really into it, which is cool. So like they have a lot of questions, trying to get them to not talk about it during it. Like, okay, like I have to get pen and paper to write it down so we can have those conversations. Because it's good for them to have questions, but when we're watching something with other people, it's like they're in the mass break and they'll ask questions. It's like, it's cool to have questions, but there's the time and the place. But I thought they were, they're so well done. But we're getting into, it was the first episode had a lot to do with John the Baptist. And I just like how Creepy John, yeah. Right? Well, he didn't cut his hair. He was living on the desert. He wasn't showering much. He's just, I do like that part that they call it creepy. But it was cool to see the backstory of how, he lost his head basically and how.
Spoiler. Come on, man.
Well, if you know the story, that's
what
cool.
I appreciate about The Chosen. Like, we obviously know the story, but they keep me engaged. Like, I want to, the episode that Dima and I just watched was, excuse me, the one where Jesus, I thought this was really cool how they did this. And if you're one of those people that it's not biblical, this is really going to throw you off because this isn't biblical at all. But again, it's just storytelling. They're not meant to, they're not trying to tell the Gospels verbatim. But I like how they turned Simon the Zealot and the man who was paralyzed by the pool
as brothers.
And just the how they developed those 2 backstories and how Jesus kind of comes in the picture and he heals the one brother in order to draw Simon into the fold. I thought it was so powerful.
Yeah, they do that in this episode 2 where they kind of give a backstory of like, and you have to think about it that too. Like they're always like Jesus wouldn't just randomly start telling a story. It would probably be about something that just happened that they were going through and to put it into context. He wouldn't just say, forgive your brother this many times. Like, no, there was an opportunity that somebody probably had to forgive somebody and that's what they do. Spoiler.
Well, you think, place grounded in reality. Yeah. When does a pastor or a priest really knock out a good sermon? It's usually when they've had an experience pastorally and they're able to reflect on it and then distill the universal truth that then they can share with us. So a lot of the stuff, because I get to participate in our homily prep here at SJE, at our parish, and it's like a lot of it is inspiration that the Holy Spirit places on our hearts, especially our priests' hearts, but then they draw inspiration from their experiences and their encounters. So that could be very much the same with Jesus, where he might have had an interaction with either one of the disciples or a confrontation with a Pharisee or in healing someone or in whatever the situation may be. And then that gave rise to a parable. That gave rise to something that is universally applicable to all of us.
And not necessarily that you have to believe it, but it just makes sense.
How about The Chosen?
Yeah, The Chosen. That's why it resonates. But like I say, well, there are 2 kinds of truth. There is objective and subjective. They're both necessary. And what's
a subjective truth, Bobby?
This is something that it's like real to you. Like no one can argue with my story. It's true to me.
Are you saying my truth?
No, I'm saying my story about
you gotta be careful. That's something that confuses people.
Yeah, not my truth like that, but like my experience of the truth or the faith. So everyone has to live their truth through their own biases and their own reality of how they see the world or their experiences or the things they've gone through. Like, my conversion is different than your reversion. It's like, but no one can argue with my truth because it's within my heart. I'm telling you what happened to me, and that's easy.
Could you say it's something like what we would call anecdotal?
Yeah.
Right. So an objective truth is something that objectively is
true always, all the time.
Yeah, across multiple people, across time. Yeah. So an objective truth is Christ is king. That's an objective truth.
True.
Subjective truth is how you relate to that statement. So if you're a Catholic and you're a devout believer and you actually try to live as though Christ were king, that's going to be a truth that's different than someone who's a non-believer. where it's still objectively true Christ is king, but to someone who's a non-believer, they're not going to claim that as a truth that they live their life by.
Yeah, and then how someone lives that out in their own lives, because each of us has a different calling or purpose. How does that manifest in my life? It may be serving the poor in a certain way.
Yeah.
It may be being a husband or being a religious or being a celibate, whatever that may be. That's your own kind of, not that it's, relativism where we're confusing like, no, I believe it, therefore it's true.
That's an important distinction. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's too much. That's what the culture is saying, is that it's my truth. And we know just from getting through Passion Week, that was a big part when Jesus is talking to Pilate, and Pilate just asked him, well, what is truth? And Jesus, I'm the truth. He's looking at truth himself, and he's asking, well, is it even possible to have anything that is true? And too much of that's what's going on in our culture now, is that we're arguing about things that should be very objectively true for everybody, that we still have to have these conversations about things that should just be things that people know instinctively, because God says in Romans that, there's no excuse. He writes it in our hearts. We know these things. You know what's good. You know what's wrong, regardless if you read the Bible or you've had these experiences, that it's written in your heart.
We do a disservice to people when we don't educate them from an early age on some of these universal philosophical principles that build the foundation of thinking. And so very simply, like, truth cannot contradict itself.
Yeah.
If you have an objective truth, then a subjective truth can't contradict it, can't overrule it. And more so, there's an objective truth. Relative truths cannot contradict it. And so when we say something objectively, the sky is blue, your subjective reality, let's say you're colorblind, you don't see blue, no, the sky is green. Well, in your case, it might be green because there's conditions that—
anecdotal, like you said.
Yeah, there's conditions that don't allow you to see the objective truth. But it doesn't mean that the objective truth isn't true, right? So truths can't compete against each other.
Yeah.
And we've kind of lost a sense of that. To claim like my truth is the truth, how do you get 10 people in a room that all claim to have their own truth? How do you get them speaking the same language and on the same page?
And then you have the Tower of Babel problem, where you have so many different people with so many different ideas that can't come together. And that's why we see our countries and different organizations falling apart, because we're not speaking even the same language.
Yeah.
We're not seeing the same things that used to unite all of us on things that we just held for granted, that, that God is good, family is good, like, men are men and women are women, like these controversial type subjects. Now it's like, how would that ever become controversial? Like, sacrificing and hard work is a good thing. Like, it's, these things that we just have to defend, these things that should just be so obvious, but that's just the way the world is. And it got me thinking, what you said about knowing in general. I've been really contemplating, thinking about, especially like in our faith, a lot of people who have fallen away, they have been taught a little bit like about the faith. Like, they might have went through Catholic school. They might have went to CCD. Yeah. They may know a little bit about the Bible. They know the head knowledge. It's that difference between knowing Jesus with our minds or knowing the truth in our heart. And I think the church for a long time did a bad job of connecting the two or getting people to the next level, because like faith in God isn't just like a true false test. Like, do you believe in God? Yes, true. But when God speaks about knowing him, our purpose in life is to know, love, and serve God. And that knowledge isn't about Jesus per se 100%. It's, yes, we have to know about him, but it's more, does he know me? Do we allow him into when they use the word know in the Bible, it's the same word that Adam knew Eve. It was his identity. It was how he knew her intimately as a wife. Like, that's the kind of knowledge that God, where that knowledge gets within our hearts, not just something in an idea that I assent to, but a way that has changed me from within. And that's what's the hard part. That's what they say, the longest distance in the world is from someone's head to their heart. So how as church can we do a better job of, obviously we have to teach people, we have to educate people so they know the knowledge, but what, in your opinion, is some of the best ways to try to get people to know them in a personal way?
Well, as you're saying all this, I'm thinking we have to overcome we have the ability to use technology to manipulate our environment.
Yeah.
And it seems like on a general level, and I'm guilty of it first, we want to create comfortable lives for ourselves. And we want to fall into that comfort. Well, we weren't created for comfort. And so while we can use technology to augment our surroundings so that we live comfortably, where am I going with this? We have kind of also lost the ability to think critically and to be patient and to probe. We want to take things at face value and we want to run with it, right? Again, it just makes us comfortable. If I can at face value hear something or something resonates with me that fits into my worldview where I don't have to question my worldview because I'm comfortable in my worldview, I'm comfortable in the bubble that I've created for myself. And now I've got the internet, again, a thing that we've created that I can use to then find other people who are going to share my worldview. Then I can get very comfortable in my echo chamber. And we see that a lot. Yeah. And so what happens when you kind of live in these bubbles and you only associate with like-minded people, you lose the critical thinking ability, that muscle, to question and to probe and to want to dig for the truth. And then when confronted with the truth, to turn around and change your worldview. We don't do that as much. Like the adage is like Twitter before they lifted up their character limits. Like you just say things in 140 characters. And that's how we think now. It's very short. It's very abrupt. We don't probe. We don't question. We look for political wins. You know, if you're a politician who score political points, it's like, hey, does this policy or does this idea sound good? Does it feel good to me? Yeah. Does it fit into my worldview? Okay, that must be the truth. But we don't bother to probe deeper. And so someone who probes deeper says, very simply, I think this has practical implications for us, does the way I live my life set me up for greatness and for the greatness that God has in store for me? Or am I, again, just living in my bubble? Do I place God in my bubble, right? That's what I resonate with Nicodemus on The Chosen. He questions this idea of like they created a box and they've placed God in the box being the law and the prophets. It's like, do I do that with God? Like, do I have to fully understand God? Do I have to kind of predict how he's going to operate? Or do I let God kind of lead me outside of my comforts? And intellectually, you have to be led outside of your comforts. You have to be willing to turn around and confront yourself and be willing to change. We don't do that very well. To the detriment not only of ourselves, but of our families, of our communities, of our country. We're so polarized. We're so like this whole thing of either you're a Democrat or you're a Republican or you're red or you're blue, you're progressive or you're conservative. It's like, since when did we become this like ones and zeros? Yeah. It doesn't make sense. I mean, aside from objective truth, where you can claim definitively like, okay, Christ is king. We're going to say that's, from our perspective, an objective truth, right? God is Trinity, objective, these dogmas of our faith, objective truths. But we tend to live in the gray a lot. And you have to maneuver in the gray. We have to reclaim that if we're going to move forward as a people.
And I think, I just was thinking the Pope Benedict quote he kept saying is that, we weren't made for comfort, we're made for greatness. Yeah. And that's so much that we're willing to trade greatness for comfort. Because if it's, that's how I lived my life before I became Catholic, for the most part, it's like, if it's easy, do it. What's the least amount I could do to get by, and it's tempting because there's so much calling to our attention all the time. There's not a lot of things that we do great. It's like I got to be a father, I got to be a husband, I got to do this, I got to do that. It's like I give just enough energy at one thing, and it's so much, we're spread so thin. Yeah. But when I find that, I feel like that the best thing to do is to take the advice is to be still and know that I am God. I mean, a lot of it has to take time to reflect and to think about these things that, as if I'm in a bubble, maybe I need to talk to people who don't agree with what I agree with. I need to see their perspective. Why do we go to the same church and they think this thing and I think this thing? What can I learn from them? Am I being closed-minded? Am I worshiping the same God? Because it seems like we're way different. But a lot of it is just because, I don't want to be challenged to be outside of my comfort zone. But I like to say that if we're not living outside our comfort zone, then how can we let the comforter come in and move us? Because if I always just do what I've done, you're just going to have what you got. You're never going to grow. And to grow is, without growth, you're not going to be great. You're just going to be the same every day. And eventually there's, atrophy. You're going to get less great. Mm-hmm. So, but for me, I've been struggling with not just, because I love to learn, I love to read books, I love to podcast, but does that always lead to knowing God better in my heart? Sometimes. But the things that work for me is spending time in adoration, spending time with God in silence, spending time with him in his word, praying the rosary, doing things like that are spiritual, like even retreats. I was listening to a talk with Fulton Sheen. It's like retreats now are all about conversation. Like, no, retreats used to be, we go away to let God talk to us. Because a lot of the times in these discussions that we have, decisions don't get made on a personal level. That's where the encounter in our hearts come from. Not necessarily having discussions about it, but making decisions. Am I going to follow the Lord the way that he's calling me to? Instead of trying to rationalize, well, I do this because of that. Instead of spending time in silence, spending time in front of him in the Blessed Sacrament, in confession or in his word, where that's where he's calling to us to the greatness. It's the other, a lot of the other mundane stuff that we get lost in. It's in those times of challenging. It's hard to sit still for 30 minutes in front of the Blessed Sacrament and not pray, not read scripture, just sit there and say, God, what do you want me to do? And let him talk to you, because he's going to challenge you to greatness. He's going to challenge you to go forgive somebody. He's going to challenge you to, maybe you should stop doing that. Or maybe, that idea I put in your head about writing a book, you should do that. Or this thing that you've been, the things that you avoid are usually the things that God put on your heart that you're not happy, you're restless because you're avoiding those things that you should be doing. And that's how we form that relationship and that encounter in our heart, is by listening to his voice. Instead of us doing all the talking, take some time to do the listening.
There's a distinction between, so we're drawing head knowledge, heart knowledge.
Yeah.
Head knowledge can be had through acquiring more data. However it is you acquire it. Reading, listening to podcasts, watching videos, whatever. That's how you acquire head knowledge. Heart knowledge tends to be acquired through experience. So if you're feeling like there's that disconnect between you and God, what are you doing? What sort of experiences, what sort of actions are you introducing into your life that expose you to our Lord, so that you can have that heart knowledge, that experience that comes from encounter, so that it can not only inform your heart, but also your head. And then as you fall in love, as you kind of, not just necessarily fall in love, but as you start getting acquainted with who God is, as he begins to reveal himself to you, that's where the book knowledge, the book learning comes in. That's where the conversations come in, because now you're starting to learn about this person that you're starting to develop a relationship with.
Yeah.
So they go hand in hand. For some people, it starts in the head, then it works its way into the heart. For some people, it starts in the heart, works its way up to the head. But in both ways, it's like, what am I doing to expose myself to this encounter with God? Keeping in mind, so yes, there's this movement we make, keeping in mind that movement is also an inspiration of grace. Yeah. Like God himself chooses to reveal himself to us. And this kind of this attraction we have toward him, that's an act of grace. And that's what kind of sets Catholics and Orthodox Christians apart. We have to cooperate in that grace in a daily way in order for us to really work out our salvation, what it means for us to be in right relationship with God. And so if you're not doing those practical things to have this encounter with God on a regular basis, even daily basis, then you're always going to find yourself just a little wanting. You're going to be a little lacking. That sense of emptiness, that sense of like, well, I mean, I don't know. I don't fully understand it. I don't fully, do I believe he's real? Those kind of gray area questions, you're not going to get clarity on them until you make this conscious yes to the grace God's given you to encounter him deeper.
Yeah, and the encounter it's very important. And we have to keep having them, I think, too. I found that in my spiritual journey is like,
well, you have to keep having them. So like, I didn't go to the Chosen on Sunday. Because
right. We won't hold it against you.
Well,
you're not caught up probably either. You don't want to.
I'm not. I'm only on like season 2, episode something. I'm loving it. And I love that I was able to help bring it to the parish. I'm looking forward to them getting the last 4 episodes out. So we're praying for the Chosen team to figure out whatever's going on in the back end there. So we only have the first 4 episodes. We showed 2 last weekend. This Sunday, we're going to show the second 2.
It was a good turnout too.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, it was cool.
So we ended up, speaking of relationship, it was a beautiful day. It was like the first day of summer. And so I did like a full summer day. I cut the grass, started cleaning out the garage. I started getting the house ready for the new baby. So, pulling all that stuff out. It's amazing. I took a picture of it. Like I filled the driveway with just all the baby stuff, cribs and bassinets and carriers and all that stuff. I feel like I'm getting too old for this stuff. I got to go back to a carrier and like infant-sized diapers. Even though my baby's come a little big, I don't think I've ever used an infant-sized diaper.
Yeah.
But, and then I ended up taking my son Jacob to the Dollar Tree, and I just bawled out. I bawled out at the Dollar Tree.
That's the best. Yeah.
We were just going down like the summer toy aisle. Like we grabbed a couple super soakers, some water pistols. He's like, "Can I get some bubbles?" Yeah, get some bubbles. We got a bubble machine. You would have loved it.
Yeah.
Came back to the house. We were fully armed up. We just had a beautiful day. Him, his 2-year-old sister. My wife's pregnant, so thankfully she wasn't running around with us. But we're just in the yard having fun with each other. Like that's what develops relationships. You see it you hear it often, sadly, like the disengaged dad who's not present with the kids and the ramifications that has, right? This sense of like, I wish I spent more time with my kids. I wish I spent more time. My dad spent more time with me, or I spent more time with my dad. Like that happens in our relationship with our Heavenly Father. If we don't make the time, He is available, right? The image of Jesus, like wanting to knock on the door of our hearts. He's available. He wants to be brought in. We have to make the time. So it's in making the time that I get to know my kids in a new way. They get to see their dad in a new way. Day in, day out, you have those kinds of experiences. Those relationships begin to solidify. That's where love really begins to bubble up. I mean, I'm sure you had this experience. You got 2 kids. When I first brought Jacob home, he was my firstborn, you hear these things like, oh, the love and the this and then that, and oh, it's so magical, it's so beautiful. I was terrified, dude. I'm like, the nurse is getting us ready to leave. And I'm like, you're coming with us, right? Like, you're not going to let me take this person home alone.
Right.
I didn't, like, there wasn't like this love and like this, like, whatever Hollywood paints it to be. It was more like, I got to protect this kid. I got to provide for this kid. I've got to.
Men, for sure.
Then the love came in. Because like the first month, he's just swaddled in the corner sleeping. Like that's all and he'd cry whenever his mom had to feed him. Like I was pretty much out of the picture, aside from a couple diaper changings. Not much else I can do. But over time, personality starts to show, like we start interacting, and then the love just starts to build and build. And you get to a point where you can't imagine your life without him.
Yeah, and that's part of the process. For men, it's different than women. It's, for me, soon as immediately like a chemical change in my body, I felt like,
what?
Like of when the my daughter was almost 6 weeks early. So it was like scary in itself.
Oh, yeah.
But God gave me an extraordinary grace of trust and faith. Like I knew everything was fine.
Yeah.
And we didn't even have our baby shower yet. So it was like the next day. The baby shower was the next day. Like, so we didn't even have
the baby's there.
And the baby's here. So I had to go to the baby shower by myself. She was in the NICU. And it was right away, like provider, protector. Like, yeah, the love wasn't there. I'm like, what do I got to do? I got to get all the stuff together. It was like that. But yeah, it takes time. Just like, and if you're not there yet with God, that's okay. And if you're just learning, and, for me, it was like, I had an encounter in a real way, but then those feelings fade, those mountaintop experiences where you feel this overwhelming sense of love, then the reality kicks in of the kid, dirty diapers you got to change, or the mess, or they're always, it's never enough, they're complaining, all these other things. You got to have these other encounters, like a Sunday where you're just loving each other and spending time with each other, having carefree timelessness. And we got to do that with God too. If it's just, oh, I got to go to mass on Sunday, it's just how we shift our perspective of, I have to versus I get to. And I think that's a big thing of having that attitude of gratitude, because it's not always going to be, rainbows and sunshine. There's going to be tough times. There's going to be sickness. There's going to be, difficulties in parenting. Last night, I know our daughter was like throwing a tantrum, and it was like really difficult night. It's like for no reason, because she's dealing with her emotions and her maturity. And it's like, not every relationship is like that where it's perfect all the time, but it's then getting back up the next day, resurrendering, resubmitting, committing to, and it takes sometimes these encounter moments, whether that's taking the kid to the zoo or with God, going to an encounter night where there's praise and worship, or spending time away at a retreat or doing these things where we have to foster or taking, same with your wife, taking, it's hard when you're busy and you got kids to take her out on a date to where it's like, okay, remember why we fell in love and why we're doing this. Yeah. It's like we can get distracted in I have to do this and do this and do this. And then, it really takes away a lot of the joy. Sometimes we have to be reminded in these, God gives us these awesome days, sunny days. And it's like, hey, we got nothing else to do. Let's splurge a little bit and let's just focus on each other. And God wants that for us too. It's like, if Mass doesn't feel like that for you, then find a different way, to rekindle your faith, whether that's go to a retreat, like I said, or, do something different, do something or remember the reason why you fell in love with God in the first place and go back to that, be nostalgic about it. But we have to keep having those mountaintop experiences because the feelings won't always be there. But those are the best Masses sometimes, is when you don't get anything out of it. The homily was not good. You were distracted, but you were there not for the feelings. You were there for God. And he notices that. And then that's how your faith grows, is that you're going for the right reasons. We're at Mass, not for what God's going to give me, but what I'm there to give God.
And for people who get frustrated, like expecting God to operate differently, I would just constantly call yourself back to patience, something that we all struggle with, and not projecting expectations, because you're going to set yourself up for disappointment. So what do I mean by that? God gives us human relationships, which when they're at their best, they're meant to be a mirror of our relationship with him. That's why he places himself in this familial role with respect to who we are. So as Father, Jesus as Son. And so when my relationship with my wife is good and we're clicking, we're connecting, you're kind of on a peak, that's a reflection of what your relationship should be with your Heavenly Father. Now, it's not always peaks. You're going to hit some valleys, and sometimes it's because of things you're working through in the relationship. Sometimes it's external things. You're dealing with financial stuff. You're dealing with other family. You're dealing with raising kids. You're dealing with work commitments. You're dealing with whatever it is that puts you down a slump. You got to work through those slumps together. And if you do, you come out stronger together. Same thing in the spiritual life. When you start going through those slumps, like, God, I'm not really feeling you. I'm not getting clarity. I feel anxiety. I feel stressed. It was so much better back then. That's that. We got to be caution ourselves to always kind of like look back. It was better then. So I must have done something wrong. I lost something. Like, God, why aren't you? No, you got to work. God's still there. You work through that slump with him. And then ultimately you'll come through the other side more grateful, having put in the work and more connected to who God is and what he can do for you. That's where trust comes in. I was still reflecting on our last podcast. We talked about the acts of faith, the miracles that the early church had done. St. Peter telling somebody to get up and walk in the name of Jesus. They were so in tune with God because they had journeyed with him so intentionally for so long that they have this ability not only to hear his voice, which prompts them to act, but their faith is so bold and their trust is so strong because it's built on this daily experience of, yes, God, if I ask, you shall give. And if I ask in this way, I know you shall give, because our wills are aligned. That only comes out of a relationship. It doesn't come without it. So you have to continue to commit to God if you want him to be a part of your life.
Yeah, and just like every relationship, you're going to get out of it what you put into it. Yeah, you're going to have that grace, and he's going to, he wants to outpour that. But if you don't take the time, and just like in your marriage or with your kids, if you don't take the time, then how can you expect it to grow? It's just not going to organically just get better on its own. Nothing works like that. Everything works the opposite. Everything's entropy. Everything is getting worse on its own. That's just how the universe was built. It's a fallen world. So if you want to fight against that inertia or that entropy, you have to do something in the positive to make it grow. It's just not going to grow on its own. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Even I heard a good thing about like trees, how they grow. Trees grow two ways at the same time. They grow down, like the root structure is about the same as, like if you look at a tree underground, it looks almost exactly the same as it above ground, but it first has to go down deep. It has to go against all that friction, it has to fight against gravity. But once it gets down in there where all that work's at, then it can grow up. But it takes that effort, and it takes that that resistance sometimes you have to face resistance to grow. Just like we've talked about this a bunch with growing spiritual muscles, the same a lot in the anatomy, how we grow real muscles, that you have to put a demand on it and you have to, make it grow, and that's a lot with our faith. A lot of it does come by grace, and that's good. But like you mentioned earlier, sometimes we have to, like St. Paul says, we have to work out our salvation. And sometimes that's working out bad habits. Sometimes that's working out our ego, our selfishness, our misconceptions, where we have to learn things or read the Bible. But a lot of times we can just be overwhelmed by grace, but that's not always going to be there. It's going to be a lot of the tough times. You're going to wake up and got to start over again. Today's a new day. Hey, how do you start your day? Okay, start on your knees. They offer the day up to God. Do the offering. Read the Bible for 15 minutes, meditate on the scriptures, be thankful, having an attitude of gratitude, see things as a gift. And then, but it's hard some days. Some days you wake up, you don't feel good. Some days you got a lot of stress. You got a big project. You got bills that they're coming, or you got all these tests or things like that. So it's like, we can't just, when it gets hard, just give up. That's where sometimes God is leading us is in those dark tunnels.
Yeah.
Or, the footprints, where it looks like there's only one set of footprints, but because he was carrying us. It's like he's trying to teach us something in these dark times and these hard times. But our hope is in that he's overcome this world, that he's going to be with us. He promised that is his. Just because it doesn't feel like he's not there doesn't mean he's not.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of dark times.
Yeah. This world's crazy.
I know it's crazy, dude. I'll hop off X for a couple days, and then I'll hop back on. It's just like you're back in it. And so I was off for a couple days, and then I came back on, and I saw that this bishop in Australia, Bishop Emmanuel Mari. So for those of you that don't know, he's a bishop of in the Assyrian Church of the East. They're in partial communion with the Chaldean Church, which is in full communion with the Roman Catholic Church. So as Catholics, we recognize them as an authentic apostolic church.
It's based out of Australia.
Yeah, so that's just a little piece of context of who we're talking about. So there's a bishop in that church. He's kind
of famous on TikTok and Instagram, and
yeah,
he's social. He's out there.
And he made a name for himself. There's some issues that he took an opinion that certainly in the mainstream media would be deemed controversial on a number of issues that are controversial for them.
He gets political. For sure.
He's not afraid to get into that stuff, which I love. Here's why I love it. So I'm going to take a little tangent here. And I try to say this all the time, and I get we shouldn't turn the ambo, we shouldn't turn the homily into like a political commentary. But at the same time, we have to have avenues as Catholics where we talk about these things, whether they're in pop culture, whether they're in politics, whatever, the news of the day, what's trending. We have to talk about these things because other people are talking about them, and we ourselves are talking about them. Yeah. And so we need the light of the church, the light of the gospel, the light of church teaching and tradition to help inform it so that we are guided, right? And it's like,
too much of it's avoided.
Too much of it is avoided. We don't want to offend people. They make up their own
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't want to offend. We don't want to be kind of drawn into camps because it's so easy. Like we started the conversation by saying we're so polarized. You're on this side or the other. It's like, no, I can be a free thinker and have views that are deemed to be progressive, quote unquote, or deemed to be conservative, quote unquote, or libertarian, quote unquote. But that doesn't fully define who I am. And I think the church is weary of not stepping into these important conversations that are engrossing the majority of people because they don't want to get labeled one way or another. I don't know. That's my opinion on that. Do you have a different take on it?
No, I think there's a way to talk about them without being divisive. There's a way to talk about issues that are going on in the news without pointing fingers at one side or the other, to just to talk about it in a way that's saying, okay, this is what's going on. This issue a lot of times isn't just political, and political is just downstream from the theological. It's like there's some other truths behind a lot of these things. And I think, we don't have to name, President Biden or President Trump every time like that. I don't think you're saying that. I just think that when we're talking about, like right now, I'm anxious about what's going on in the world. Like we're on the verge of World War III. If you don't understand what's going on, Iran just shot 300 missiles into Israel from Iran. They shot 99% of them down, but they're on the verge of retaliating. So like, that's a big thing. And it's existential to the world with nuclear weapons and dirty bombs, and, immigration's been, kind of lax, and people coming across the borders, and I'm saying
is putting it lightly.
Yeah. And that Iran saying, well, who knows how many people are getting snuck out. Like, there's some people feel the angst of the world, what's going on with China and Taiwan, and these things are going on. So just because you don't talk about them at the pulpit doesn't mean that me, Joe Q, in the pew is not thinking about, especially as a father, of protecting my family.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I still trust Jesus. I have hope, but I'm still worried on a practical level. Like, my kids are not old enough to be in the draft yet, but if there's like a war like that, our kids are going to be drafted. Like, those are kind of things I'm thinking, like, is there, they're going to hit us with an EMP. They're out talking about that. Like, every show now is about fallout shelters. And it's like, the world is doing that. So it's like, we can't just ignore it. We should also say, okay, the world seems a little bit messed up. There's a lot of trials and tribulation. Jesus is conquered, but how can we practically deal with this? What's the gospel telling us? What is the church telling us? Not to avoid it, not talk about it, not acknowledge it, and talk about something random. It's like these topics we don't want to talk about, like death, judgment, heaven, and hell. It's like the 4 things. We don't preach about those things either.
Yeah.
But because it's controversial. Like, what do you mean you talk about heaven and hell? I'm going to heaven. Like, people don't want to hear that. Like, there's a hell. Well, it's true.
Well, when you listen,
there's a war right now.
So one example is St. John Vianney. You look at some of his preachings, it was all like fire, brimstone, and just hard. We've gone to the complete opposite end of that.
Yeah.
Because he was an extreme.
Yeah.
Especially through our lenses, looking back at him, culturally it was more appropriate without going into the full scope of like, oh, he was trying to convert a town that was really lost and wayward, and so he's trying to call people back and placing the reality of what's in front of them if they continue to go down this route. And we've gone to the other opposite end where we don't really talk about those things because we don't want to offend and upset people.
Yeah, it doesn't make it any less true just because you don't talk about it. Just because you're not talking about the war about to happen doesn't mean it's not happening and people aren't thinking about it. Yeah. So you want to try to help guide people and inform them with the light of the gospel on how to handle this kind of situations. Like, maybe do a holy hour. That was Fulton Sheen's whole thing. It's like, there was World War II, this and that. He just constantly would start his preaching every time. It was like, there's craziness going on in the world. This is the solution. I need all Protestants, Jews, and Catholics to do a holy hour. If that's in your synagogue, that's in your church, or if you could do it from the Blessed Sacrament, do a sacrifice and pray and pray for the peace of the world. Like, we don't hear that anymore. It's like, just ignore it, act like nothing's going on. Like, no, the world is a messed up place. And we know that. But it isn't to just not acknowledge the world at all. And doesn't mean that's all we have to talk about. But to avoid the hard conversations of like this Bishop Mari Emanuel, he talked a lot about the downfalls of Islam. And it's controversial to some people, but he ironically was attacked by somebody screaming Allahu Akbar, so, this is, but he says, but forgive those people. Like, even when they come at you, it doesn't mean to put your head in the sand and be a Pollyanna about it, but to be, turning your other cheek doesn't mean, oh, I'm just a pacifist. Like, go ahead, hit me here, go ahead and hit me there. Like, I'm going to go back up the next week, I'm going to preach the same thing I'm preaching. But it's not to avoid these tough conversations because they're not going away. The people in the pews are still going to be thinking about them. The news is going to talk about it. Twitter is going to be on there. But I know something's going to happen. So how do we best prepare our souls, and how can we help? Obviously I'm not going to be in Iran or Israel, but I can pray. I can talk about those things to not be worried with my kids and to trust God and stuff like that. But there's other things and ways to do it. But especially in this election year, it's just starting. It's Trump's in court and Biden's this. It's like these things that we might not talk about them directly, from the pulpit, but doesn't mean that the people in the pews who are the body of Christ have to deal with these things. We don't have to always do it, but never talking about tough situations isn't helping either. If it's all just love all the time, which is nice message, but I think that
and it's true and it's appropriate.
Yeah.
But we should be able to develop that message so that we can unpack it as it relates to specific things that are either happening in the world, happening in our communities, or are just on our minds in general, whether it's something that's trending or what have you. Yeah. Like, that message of God is love is a universal message, and it can be unpacked in so many different ways so that again, conversations can be informed and we as people can be guided. So this bishop, fortunately, he's okay from all accounts. There hasn't been a lot of information that's come out, at least I've been trying to follow. I haven't seen a lot.
Just what like we talked about, like Taylor Marshall is one.
But even in Asia, there was another priest that was shot.
Yeah.
There's been an uptick recently in violence towards Christians, and at least maybe because it's in our bubble.
Yeah.
Especially against Catholics. And
it's the most martyrs in the last century than there's been in the history of the world. No one's talking about it. But there is actually a martyrs walk coming up at the end of the month in April. There is a young lady, I believe her name is Gia Chacon, I believe. She's leading this martyrs walk to draw attention to all the Christians who are being killed throughout the world. That's something we don't talk about. It's like people are being killed for Jesus. And it's not even talked about. It's like, well, if I would have been at the Holocaust, I would have helped save people. Well, no, that's going on right now all over the world, in Africa, in Asia. This may not happening here in America. But look at Australia. I mean, people are trying. They're very, synagogues get shot up, Catholic priests being stabbed. Like in Africa, whole villages on Easter, there's been all kinds of attacks. There's bombings, these things going on, but there's not a whole lot of people talking about the martyrs. And there is a walk coming up. I want to say it's April 27th, but Jim Caviezel's involved with it. It's going to be in DC. It's got a big walk. And it's something that needs to be talked about because it's a travesty, just like there's modern day slavery going on. It's like these issues that people that are human trafficking stuff, like just because it's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about it. It's like the Sound of Freedom movie. People are like, oh, that's so hard. I'm like, yeah, but putting your head under the sand and ignoring it doesn't make it go away.
I know, but so I'm going to take a devil's advocate stance here. Yeah. There's so much going on in the world and most of it I can do nothing about. Like, when do I draw the line? How far can I stretch my ability to focus and to take in all this information, be stretched?
No, it's hard.
And so where do you draw the line?
Well, I just think we don't have to do anything directly all the time, but I think some things, it helps to expose something by even talking about it to the one person. That person may do something about it. Everyone's got their purpose. Everyone's got whatever God's calling them. And maybe trafficking isn't your thing, or maybe the martyrs isn't your thing, or maybe what's going on in Israel, that's not your thing. But just to be a little bit knowledgeable about what's going on in the state of the world and Christians are being attacked and praying. I mean, we can all pray. I mean, just because it doesn't look like anything's being done doesn't mean that things aren't being done on a realm that we don't see because we're so materialistic so much. And maybe not only does it change the situation, but it helps change us. Maybe God put that on your heart for a reason to pray for it, and maybe he is calling you to help other people pray for it, and maybe someone in that group will want to do something. I mean, we can't do everything. We can't be everything to everybody all the time, but we can speak up in our little spheres of influence to say, hey, did you see that? Like, that's not cool. Like, what's going on in the Middle East? Like, or in Ukraine? It's like, it seems that there's a steady degeneration of order and what's going on. And it's a lot. And I think that's how the evil one is working, is that he's distracting us in so many ways. It's like, what can I do? Let's throw my hands up and do nothing. It's like, so we can be defeatist about it. We can't let that win, but we could pick, our spots to where we can affect the most change, which we've talked about before. I think the best way to make change is locally. That's the Catholic social teaching of subsidiarity, where we start first with ourselves and then our local community by supporting, your local parish and supporting ministries that your parish is doing for, providing food for people. Maybe it's sending, stuff to these areas or having a rosary group that prays this week for the martyrs or whatever it may be. There's something locally that you can do that just because it doesn't seem like you're not making a big difference doesn't mean it's not making an impact some way, whether that's on them or on yourself, to be more loving, or to be more caring. But it's difficult, especially as a parent. It's like we want to give the world to our kids that's going to be better than the one that we inhabited. And it seems like it's going in a different direction. And it could be disheartening, but we should also trust and have faith. But that doesn't also mean that we put our head in the sand and act like nothing's going on and just saying, everything's good, everything's good. And it's like, woe to the prophet who says all is good when it's not. That always resonated with me in the Old Testament. These prophets would come and say, no, everything's good, everything's good. And the other prophet come up and like, no, it's not good, and something needs to happen. And if we don't repent and we don't turn back to God, then something serious is going to happen. And I think that's what we can do How much of what's going on is because of this lack of people who are turning to God in our country? So there's some good news and there are people being added, but like in America and Europe and in Australia, it's not good. I just saw Italy's like 10% of the people are Catholic now in Italy, where the Vatican and Rome's at 10%. So what's going to happen to those churches? Are they become mosques, or, are they just going to become cafes like all these other things are? It's like, but what can I do in our country? What can I do for my parish? What can I do for my family and my friends to help bring them to turn back to God? Because it's going to take a great awakening. There's been 2 great awakenings in the United States that help revitalize, maybe God's calling us for a greater awakening, that, we get kind of what we deserve sometimes in this world. And it seems like there's a correlation between us falling away from God and bad things happening. That's what it says all throughout Scripture. It's like, you turn away from God, bad things are going to happen. A lot of bad things are happening. So the answer is turn back to God. And like, how does that look like for us practically? How can we get other people to invite them to, hey, you know what? You used to be Catholic. What's going on? How can we go to Mass? Invite them to adoration, or invite them to an alpha, or invite them to an event going on, or just pray with them, talk to them, form a relationship with somebody to try to get to know them. But we don't have to go fight in a war. We don't have to do these great things, but we can do these small things with great love. I think that's the answer.
And I'm very curious to see, so going back to this story of the bishop in Australia, how not only he reacts to this publicly, but how his community reacts to this. They can be a great witness to the power of the gospel and to the love of Christ if they respond to it in a way that is otherworldly, because
of forgiveness.
With forgiveness, because in the world it's like eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Right? You did this to me, we're going to extract something from you. That's what you mentioned the Iran-Israel thing. You did this to us, we're going to retaliate, and then it just escalates until we're mutually exhausted and depleted and destroyed. So it's like that's the way of the world. So, but if they can respond to this situation in a supernatural way, exemplifying the love of Christ, they can be a great witness of the gospel.
Yeah, and that bishop, someone was sharing a couple of his sermons where he talks about, that's exactly what he says. He's preaching that all the time. And I believe that's what he's probably going to do. But there was some of the reports I did hear of Taylor Marshall and a couple other people that it was miraculous, because when you see him speaking, he's always holding a crucifix in one hand. And when the guy went to go attack him, I guess the switchblade didn't open up all the way is what some of the reports are. And then he was like stabbing him. You can see the video. And he was barely hurt because of like miraculous, like that the blade didn't come out all the way or something. And then the people in the church came out.
They were able to.
But it doesn't mean at the same time. So 2 things can be true at the same time. One, you can forgive. It doesn't mean you have to be stupid. So hopefully they also increase some security and protect this guy if he's saying things that are, making people upset, to be a little bit more vigilant, but also be forgiving. 2 things, hold those 2 things in tension. You don't want to be, God's going to protect me no matter what.
Be shrewd as serpents, but innocent as doves.
That's it. So that's the thing. We're not to let that make you a different kind of a person. That's not what he's not going to, and like I said, he's preached a lot about forgiveness, and if you're attacked, and he actually, I saw another thing where he was talking about where he was in the Middle East and he wanted to go to the house where, from the story, was just from Sunday, the gospel in Emmaus, the house that they went to on the walk when Jesus was walking on his way to Emmaus, and they went to the house, and that Jesus was known to them in the breaking of the bread. That's in Gaza. It's on the side of Gaza, he said. And the bus driver didn't want to take him there. He's like, no, let's go. He's like, I trust God. And trying to help, he speaks Aramaic, and he's got a different worldview. He's from that area, and but he's not trying to draw enemies. He's like, he's trying to bring the gospel, which, and also going back to the chosen, when there's in this scene, is like, Jesus also said, I came to bring the sword. Sometimes I'm going to I'm going to cause division between people, because the gospel it's radical. It's calling us to something radical, something different. Forgiveness is a radical idea. It's like everybody wants to bomb Iran. Like, no, I don't want that, because then the next step is they're involved with Russia and China, and then they're going to bomb back. It's not going to stop. Someone eventually has got to be radical and say, you know what, we lucked out here. Maybe take out a military base or do something like that where there's no casualties just to stop them attacking you, more defensive, then I'm going to take out a major city or do something crazy, because that we know an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. So, but that's going to take something radical. That's going to take God to make people to get out of their rage and just retaliate and to do something radical, like love. Love's radical. It's because you're opening yourself up to be hurt. So if per se Israel does this and they don't attack back, they're opening themselves up to be, they're weak. They're cowards. We'll just keep attacking them. They're not going to do anything. So we're going to keep doing it, because that's what's in the back of our minds when we love somebody or we make ourselves vulnerable, that there's that opportunity where they can hurt you. But it's having that trust and say, well, even though you may hurt me, I'm still going to love anyways. That's what's hard in our daily lives. Forgiving our people that we, who have hurt us in the past. Doesn't mean you have to go back into the same relationship and do the same things, but that I'm going to put myself on the line, even though you may hurt me again, that I'm going to love you anyways, even though you hurt me. And it's radical. It's hard.
With this whole thing with, so brought up the Middle East, there's 3 main religions in the Middle East: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
Yeah.
My worry is that the evil one in particular, right, because he's our principal enemy, he's also ruler of this world. Jesus makes that very clear. And it's clear just by looking around us and looking at what's going on in the world, that he will co-opt religions, and he's done this before, where they are no longer religions, they're ideologies. And with ideology, you can subvert the hearts of men and their actions so that they become more conducive towards acts of violence and escalation. And that's the thing that worries me more than just one-off skirmishes. I think you're seeing this co-opting of whether it's Muslim Islamic rhetoric, whether it's this idea of tying the state of Israel to Judaism, and then you're labeling all Jews as Zionists and as proponents of a Jewish state. This idea of co-opting religious vocabulary and painting groups of people with the same brush.
Yeah.
That's a very dangerous thing, especially in the world and the level of technological sophistication that we've reached.
Yeah.
It's very dangerous.
Well, especially now too, which is kind of just shows you how this is going across different lines, because Jordan, who's a Muslim country, was also firing rockets to defend Israel. And Saudi Arabia just came out and said that they're also going to defend Israel. So obviously there's a little bit more geopolitical stuff between Sunni and Shia and stuff like that, but it's bigger than those 3 things. There's something else there other than it's just Muslims, Christians, and Jews. When you have Muslims, Christians, and Jews all together.
There's obviously something else going on, right?
Yeah.
We know it's geopolitical, but the problem is when you start co-opting religious identity, and you make it about religious means or ends rather than and
then anything's justified.
The actual ends that are behind it. So in all the articles that I read on Bishop Mari getting stabbed, they quoted the guy saying Allahu Akbar when he stabbed the guy. Yeah. So there's this religious bend to this tragic situation. Yeah. And we're seeing that across not just the region, but across the world. Yeah. Right? How many martyrs in Egypt, Coptics, were beheaded in the name of the Islamic interpretation that this group, whoever the group was at the time that martyred these young men. You saw that in Iraq. You see it in Syria with the toppling of all the churches, which are millennia old, which have been there since the beginning of Christianity, no longer there because they clash with Islamic ideology. So this idea of religions being co-opted for other ends, it's a scary thing and it's a slippery slope. We have to be careful. I mean, we can look at the history books. How many crusades were fought? How many battles were waged because of religious reasons? But now we're at a level of weaponry where those battles are no longer contained to the geographic areas that are primarily affected.
And there's a lot of collateral damage. It's a lot of innocent blood can get spilled.
So those are the things that people, I find, worry about.
Yeah.
But it's like, what can I do about that? Not much. You can't do much about it.
Not much. A lot of prayer. I mean,
directly, indirectly, we have to pray. We have to stay informed. We have to have healthy relationships. Yeah. We shouldn't fear the other. that also, I mean, that can rear its ugly head. When you start fearing other people without actually getting to know people, I mean, that's why Jesus broke bread with all people from all different walks of life. Because it's hard to be angry at somebody and upset when you're sharing a meal and when you're trying to get to know them.
Yeah, and the religious people of the day were like, why are you talking to those people? Why are you talking to the Samaritans? Why are you talking to this prostitute? It's like, well, you're sitting down to get to know people. It's hard to, they're just like you and they're just like me. And they have a lot of the same worries and a lot of the same concerns. And it's just hard as somebody who's living in the world to not talk about it at all. It's just try to get it out there, try to process it. But it does help for us to have our religious leaders to try to guide us and help us to be steady at the helm and let them know that everything's going to be all right. It's like if I'm the dad and there's a tornado coming in and the kids are worried, I'm going to say, oh, don't worry about it. It's not going to hit our house. Or am I going to hug my kids? I'm like, it's going to be okay because of this, and the house is sturdy, and this and that. It's like letting people know that everything's going to be all right. It's like when the captain takes, in front of the ship and you see them, they're leading out front, you feel a little bit more, I can get behind this person, a leader. Sometimes the leader don't have to say anything, but just by showing your courage that you're willing to face up front without saying it. Sometimes you don't have to even say anything, but we want to see strong leaders and we want to get behind those leaders, especially within the church, because that's who we're giving our lives to. If you're serious about your faith, if you're listening to this, hopefully you're taking your faith seriously. It's like we want to get behind somebody who's going to lead, and not everyone's knows how to go about doing that. So it just helps people. It's like it doesn't have to be every weekend, but once in a while to acknowledge that the world's a crazy place and what's going on.
I like this quote that you shared, Bobby, on from our Holy Father, one of his recent talks, his general audiences, because this does take courage. It takes a boldness to just be authentic to the faith that you live.
Yeah.
Our Holy Father says, a Christian without courage who does not turn his own strength to good, who does not bother anyone, is a useless Christian. I'll read that again. A Christian without courage who does not turn his own strength to good, who does not bother anyone, is a useless Christian. Now, the theologian, like the more theologically minded voice inside my head was like, well, I don't turn my own strength.
Yeah.
It's God's strength within me.
Working through me.
And working through me that I can demonstrate through my actions and my words. But then I sat with it a little bit more. And it's like, yeah, we have to be bold and we have to be willing to agitate people, to invite them out of their comfort zones, out of those bubbles that they so easily have erected for themselves over time, so that they can encounter the love that God really has in store for them and the way of life that he wants for them. And if we're not doing that, in a sense, we're lukewarm Christians. Our Holy Father says we're useless Christians. And I've mentioned this before, that idea of being a lukewarm Christian terrifies me, because Jesus tells us he's just going to swish us in his mouth and spit us out. Like we're not worthy. And so this idea of like, yeah, I don't want to be useless. What does that mean for a Christian? It means in the face of all this drama that's going on, whether it's out there or whether it's in my own house or whether it's in my own heart, do I have the courage to respond to God and to do the practical things that I can do? Like it's in my control. God doesn't place a cross on my shoulders that I can't bear. And so it's in my control to be able to say, no matter how busy the world is, I can spend 15 minutes in prayer. No matter how busy my day is, at 3 o'clock, I'm going to pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet. It takes me 10 minutes to pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet. That's 10 Instagram reels.
Yep.
All right. Go pray the Divine Mercy Chaplet.
Yep.
Like you can do these practical things. I'm going to go to Mass on Sunday, and you know what? I'm going to get there 15 minutes early. And I'm going to spend those 15 minutes. I'm going to say hi to people. I'm going to walk in and I'm going to spend some time centering myself. So when Mass does start, I can enter into Mass and not feel like Mass is being just thrown onto me, right?
Yeah.
So there's practical things that we can do to live courageously, so that when we're placed in these situations where maybe I'm at a family party and somebody brings up like a difficult thing they're going through, I can be inspired with the proper words to speak in that moment. I was just speaking with a friend this morning who's going through a couple hard things in their own family. Like, you're inspired. This person just needs someone to talk, like just to hear them out. That's an inspiration. That's a gift of the Holy Spirit. You let that person unload and be a Simon of Cyrene, like just help them carry their cross. You don't really have to exchange words. Again, that's just this courage to stand in those moments and to be Jesus to other people.
Yeah, well, the word courage in itself just comes from the word core, which is heart, and it's so much not only for us to be courageous, but to encourage other people with words of encouragement, to be an encourager on things and to be there to try to like help people and root them on, because so much of people aren't encouraged anymore. They're like, well, it's okay. Just do like the minimum. It's like, no, you have this idea, this dream, like, hey, you were going to you could do it, and like support them. Like, we don't like ever like go out of our way to try to like help people achieve their goals and their dreams. Like, it doesn't take much to give someone a word of encouragement. Like, or like you said, sometimes just encouraging them by not saying anything, like Job's friends, just sat with them in their hard
Be
time.
a comfort to them.
Yeah. But I think that does take a lot of times we don't know what to say.
It's okay not to know what to say. Like if I find if I'm in a situation like that and I don't know what to say, that's a sign from God that, I don't need to say anything. Because if he wanted me to say something, he'd inspire me with something to say. Yeah. So I'm always like thinking to myself, come Holy Spirit, just that prayer, Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. In those moments, you're offering that person up or a situation up or whatever it is. And it's like, if you're not inspired with a word, that's a sign from God that this person just needs you to be present. Because that ministry of presence is a real thing. Just to be there and be able to accompany someone as they're going through a thing. As we're talking about this, because I'm actively refraining from going down that rabbit hole of the Middle East situation. Last time we got a strike against us.
It's all right.
I don't know if we could take 2 strikes in such a short period, but which so much for the First Amendment, but what are you gonna do? To have the courage to do the right thing also gives peace, right? You get peace and you get confidence when you do the right thing. And that's the sense that I have personally, like as a country, we're not acting courageously. And so what do I mean by that? We're not doing the things that instill confidence in myself and other US citizens. Like, our national security is lacking. Our infrastructure isn't where it should be. The economy is really just going off the rails. And you have pundit after pundit, quote unquote, expert after expert saying we ought to be doing this fiscally, we ought to be doing this to curb inflation. As a millennial, you look at the Gen Zers and the Gen Alphas, and it's like, well, they won't be able to afford cars and houses, and you look at just a generation 2 ago, what they were able to afford. Like, those are things, and it's breeding hopelessness in those demographics and those groups of people. So it's like, if we had the courage to do what was right to take care of our own house, step 1, and then step 2, if we were that city on a hill, right, that just shined and radiated this light of goodness, we're also not doing that either. Most of our money is being exported to prop up wars that we really shouldn't be involved in. And so instead of being this Judeo-Christian country that comes in heavy-handedly and says, no, we're gonna arrive at a peaceful solution, we're not doing that either. And so it's deviating from the founding values that this country was built on. Because we're deviating from those values, those specifically Judeo-Christian values, that we're all feeling this collective sense of anxiety and hopelessness about the future. So it's like, why are we doing these things? Again, as Catholics, we see the evil one working behind the scenes, but as Christians, we have to be bold enough to step up and say, hey, enough's enough. Let's take care of our own house, right? Let's take the log out of our own eyes before we go to try to help our brother take a splinter out of theirs, before we try to help another country shore up their borders or their national security or their economy or whatever situation might be ailing them. Not doing that's causing a lot of what I'm seeing as kind of restlessness and kind of finger pointing.
Well, it's hard. It's a lot easier to point to somebody else and what they're doing instead of tackling the problems that are really hard, which are going to cause, people are going to be contesting everything that you do. You're never going to make everybody happy in a parish, at your house. If I do something at the house, my daughter's going to say one thing, my son's going to say something, and it can be hard. It's like, well, not everything is easy, but sometimes true leaders have to step up and be courageous and make the decisions based on what they think is right. And hopefully those leaders are using the wisdom of God, not just their own selfishness.
Yeah, I think I'm personally, like, I'm hungry for that leadership.
Yeah.
I'm not really seeing it.
I don't think we're not offering up the best and brightest, that's for sure.
We're not. And I'm not even like pointing the finger outside. I'm looking at my own family, the church, and I'm like hungry for bold leadership. And I mean this with all due respect, because I love the church. We are doing not just ourselves a disservice when we don't lead with boldness. We do the world a disservice because the world needs a strong church.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. And when there's a
the reason why the church exists is to help introduce other people to Jesus and to draw them into relationship with Jesus and to draw them away from the ruler of this world, the evil one. Yeah. And when we don't lead with boldness and with courage, especially during difficult times, in a public way, because we live in a very public time with social media and with the access to information that we have, if we don't lead publicly, then we're like the shepherd who lets the one go astray because we're afraid for the 99. And that's not where we're meant to be. In our very essence, Jesus tells us to leave the 99 and to go for the one. It's like, no, we're so afraid of losing what we have, losing our standing, losing what we've built, losing whatever, losing face, getting painted with either red or blue or,
criticized
or being criticized or whatever it is, that we're so afraid of that we're letting that one go astray, and it's to our detriment.
Well, that's part of like what I was hinting at the retreats. It's like, it's easy to just have discussions. The hard part is the decisions. People don't want to make a decision. They have to take a poll and to have this focus group on all these different people about what they think. Well, no, we elected you to make a decision. Hopefully we're electing the people to make better decisions, people that align with our values, but people have to make decisions, and you're going to have fallout from anything, whether that's moving mass time from 10 o'clock to 10:30. Half the people are going to be mad. Half the people are going to be happy. But sometimes decisions have to be made based on what the facts that are on the ground.
So we had a couple other things. We talked about Bishop Mari, pray for him. He's okay. Our Holy Father, just encouraging us to be courageous, especially in our areas of influence, in our hearts, in our homes, at work, where appropriate, and to do it with love. Maybe let's end up on something a little fun here. What's this story about trad wives? Because I've been seeing this on Instagram.
Oh, on TikTok, there's a lady too.
Yeah, what's going on with trad wives?
Well, it was like a trend. I mean, it's that women who are taking on traditional roles again, in the family, that are cooking and cleaning and wearing dresses at home and doing the role of. But I think part of it was, I think by design of how our society has set things up. It's like you need both parents to be working to supplement and because everything's so expensive. It's like everything is so, that's why you have to have both parents working to support a family nowadays, because the cost of things are so expensive. I think that was pushing, I think that's part of it. The other part was that the modern world has been telling everybody the most important thing in this world is to make money, to be professional, and do these things but more and more women, I think, are realizing now who are, getting into their 30s and realizing that these things aren't bringing me ultimate happiness. Having a family and having a child is important. I know my wife, if she had her, she would have loved to stay home with the kids for the first 5-6 years. It just wasn't financially. It was really hard for how much I make versus her not having a second income with all the bills we had already had established and our responsibilities. But that there's something beautiful about it. We don't have to be weird and be like Stepford Wives and the Amish or anything per se. But if we should be encouraging mothers to want to be traditional wives and to stay home and to help. Society's kind of falling apart and the kids are kind of crazy in this world. It's like, because a lot of the mothers are at work, and we're taking our kids and letting
again. This is anecdotal.
Daycares raise kids in the schools instead of the moms who are there
being the anchor and the cornerstone of the family.
Yeah, because that's how that's how it's always been. And this experiment, which it is, which I'm not saying that women should get back in the kitchen, don't get it twisted, anything like that. But just ultimately, it would be nice if that's what you choose and that's what you would want, that would be an option, that there's a way. And what they're doing, I know some places like in Europe, like in Hungary, that they're making it advantageous to do it, like via the tax code, that if you have kids, your taxes go down instead of how our system is set up, that if you're not married and you have more kids, in that kind of way that, it's more advantageous in taxes and stuff like that. So they're incentivizing people to have more kids and for moms to be able to stay home and to help raise your kids. Who's going to raise your kids better than you? Who the baby grew inside your body. You literally feed the baby with your body and it's your own flesh and blood. And if you're obviously in the faith and teaching the kid the faith, why would it not be better to be there and instead of babysitters and daycare to take care of your kids? It's like you're putting a lot of responsibility and trust into other people. Not to say that you have to, but that would be nice if that's what you wanted to do. And more mothers and wives are seeing that that's something that they're interested in doing and taking on these traditional roles, which are, it's, sexist or stuff like that. I don't think that's what it is. I think that if that's what you want to do, we should encourage it. Not to say, well, that's weird or that's men trying to just control women.
Yeah, I think the distinction comes in for me is a shift in our perspective and the emphasis that we place that society is composed of fundamental building blocks. On the one hand, you have this more modern take that those fundamental building blocks are the individuals. So as an individual, a collective of individuals form society. A traditional perspective is the fundamental building block of society is the family and the family unit. And how can society help nurture healthy families? And in turn, how do families then move society forward and contribute to society? This idea of breaking down society into the individual fragments society in actuality because it's no longer about families building up and passing on, because what does a family do? It passes on values and traditions, right? It passes on healthy relationship in an ideal situation where you have healthy relationships between parents and kids and husband and wife and et cetera. So family ought to be the building block of society. I find it hilarious when we're talking about trad wives that the modern movement to quote unquote liberate women is to force women into the workforce. Like, how is that? You're liberated. Now you have to work and pay taxes. It's like, I find
not only that that it's slavery to work for your husband, but it's not slavery to work for some other guy.
Yeah.
That didn't ever make sense to me. Like I said, let's not get it twisted. It's just, if that's something that you want, but something's going on.
My wife's a nurse. She loves being a nurse.
Yes.
And she's great at it by all measures. She loves it. She loves where she works. She loves what she does. She loves caring for people. She loves learning about it. She loves all that stuff. But if she were given the choice, she'd love to be at home with the kids and just being the best mother and wife that she can be.
Yeah.
But we can't afford to do that, right? And that's the story of most people.
Yeah.
Right? Insurance, the cost of living, all that stuff. Yeah. Both of us have to be working.
Yes.
And so this idea of like, oh no, women working is a form of liberation. Not when you have to. Not when there's no other choice.
Yeah. And we see what the trends are saying.
So this trad wife thing, some women are choosing to not go down that route. And they're like, no, I want to stay home and I want to take care of my husband. I want to take care of my kids. Yeah. I want to keep an orderly house. And they're getting some flack for it.
Like, they're getting attacked big time. There's a couple on TikTok. It's hilarious. Like they really, I mean, the one girl that I'm referencing, she's good looking, but she's always wearing like a dress and like, it's like, well, what's wrong with modesty? Like, would you rather have like this Rihanna dressing up, sexual, like, and you wonder why we're having the problems that we're having. It's like it isn't that complicated.
Isn't it hilarious? Like, okay, so there was the other story, like Rihanna dressed like a nun.
Yeah.
Which like, okay.
Being sexualized. Yeah.
Sexualizing nuns. Like anyway, that's disgusting, but that's okay. They'll put on the cover of a magazine.
Yes.
That'll be on ads. That'll be all over. And that's okay. Sexualizing nuns. But then a woman dresses up traditionally with an apron or, you know, with a stroller with her kids, that's repressive. That's the patriarchy. It's like, well, she's choosing that and she's telling you she wants it and that she's happy in it and that she finds it fulfilling. But her voice in that situation doesn't matter because it contradicts the popular narrative.
And let's just be honest, people aren't happier. The statistics bear the opposite. Everybody is more depressed, anxious, have suicidal ideations, who are not feeling fulfilled. And the statistics are correlated to people are having less children, they're working more hours, and they're having kids later. Like the average, you know, something I saw, some like women who are 30 and above, like 50% don't have any children. So then they're substituting dogs, which, okay, I love dogs and stuff like that, but it's not the same thing. It's like you're not putting your life into your dog. You may, but it's just totally different than raising kids. It's like that. Don't get me going down on the dog parents.
No, hold up. I was going to ask you about the dog parents.
Oh, it drives me.
Because that drives me crazy.
Because there's a hole there. Okay.
Sure.
There's there's a hole that they're trying to fill with these other things that's not going to be fulfilled with that. And that's why they're still not happy. It's like, yeah, God, you're trying to fill this God-sized hole with things that are less important than God. And then the second is your family and your children. It's like, yeah, you're not going to be happy. You're forcing this experiment isn't working. It'd be one thing. It's like, everything's great and everything's working out. Let's double down and do more of it. That's not what's happening. It's like, let's just take a step back and look at the evidence. Are women more happier on average? They're not. So more people are in therapy than ever before by a large margin. More people, like 40% of kids are on anxiety medicine. It's like, what? It's like, it's crazy that these lights just keep going on and on.
You read my mind.
See what happened? The revenge of the trad wives. There we go. So it's fun.
Don't worry about it, Mike.
Yeah, you guys.
Yeah. But I mean, we're wrapping up anyways, but it's just like one of these things that's like, we should be cheering on and encouraging people to live lives that are authentic. Like, what's the problem in society? If families are breaking down and kids are upset, like, what's wrong with a mom wanting to be a mother?
Yeah.
Like, and more women are starting to realize that as they get older in their 30s, that they're not happy.
You want to get me started on something? This trend that I'm seeing about stay-at-home boyfriends.
Oh no. I didn't see anything about that.
Stay-at-home boyfriends? Okay, stay-at-home girlfriends. I get it's still ordered towards something that's like natural. Okay, get married and then you guys can do whatever you want. That's actually like I'm okay with that.
Mr. Moms?
Yeah, but stay-at-home boyfriends where your girlfriend makes more money, so you stay at home and you do the dishes and you clean and you this and you that. Like, I am sorry. Maybe I could get like lambasted in the comments, but bring it on. Like,
I feel like one right now because I'm
the man.
working.
What's that?
I feel like that now because that's all I do.
Well, you got injured and you're trying to get back to work.
And I want to go back to work so bad. Like,
you're trying to go back to work. These guys are okay, like just taking care of house. And it's not, okay, it'd be like situations and the circumstances are important. So like if your wife truly makes more money than you and there's something wrong where you couldn't work, or maybe you have a kid that you have to care for, or maybe there's a parent or someone that you're caring for, that's great. More power to you. But an able-bodied young man who's going to be a stay-at-home boyfriend so their girlfriend can go out and make money, do you think she respects you?
Absolutely not.
What kind of, do you take pride in yourself? Like what kind of future do you think you guys are going to have?
Yeah.
This whole
I wouldn't trust the
beta boy thing doesn't work.
I wouldn't trust.
It's not working for me.
Yeah, you may be one of the boyfriends. That's what I would be thinking. I'd be thinking you're the stay-at-home boyfriend and she's got the at-work boyfriend.
She's got the at-work boyfriend.
The other boyfriend.
She's got the after-work boyfriend.
I don't see that, especially like if you're not married, why are you just a boyfriend who gets to stay at home? Like, that's something else is going on there. But each his own if that's what you want to do. But there's something about—
And these are the things, these little like quirky trends, they
weird.
come up because, again, we've taken the focus off and the significance of the family unit.
Yes.
And the importance that it plays, not just for the individuals, but for larger society, right? Families without dads are worse off than families with dads. Moms who have to go out, like you said, they're bringing the stress of work back home. They're not as attentive to they try, Like if mom has to work, mom has to work. That's okay. We'll make it happen. But if mom can choose not to work and she wants to stay home, that ought to be an option for her. Yeah. But it's like, no, this whole push for liberation is like everybody's got to get to work.
Yeah, and it's hard to do everything well. Like my wife will struggle because it's like she wants to be the best principal she could be. She wants to be the best wife she could be. She wants to be the best mom she wants to be. Yeah. She wants to be the best cook, the best house. Like you can't be great at everything. So some things have to get sacrificed. And what ends up usually getting sacrificed is not the job. The job, you have to show up. You got bosses. You got things that you have to do, and all your energy is getting put forward in the job. Yeah. Then you come home. Everybody else, it feels like you're getting the leftovers.
And that's the thing with like our system in America with jobs. Like, so we're dealing with again maternity leave. It's not easy to get on maternity leave. It's like, again, if you valued the family, then we should, especially if you're working for a Catholic institution, be able to say like, hey, I just had a baby. Hey, God bless you. We're set up so you can take the next 3 months, which are some of the most important time for the baby and for you to not only be nourishing and be present to him or her or whatever, but the bonding that happens, all the care that has to go into it, especially if you have other kids. Like the demand on you has been increased. You just went through a 9-month pregnancy and a delivery, the recovery that you need. Instead of doing that, you have to like fight for, do I have enough hours to take PTO? And then I got to get on short-term disability. And then I got to do,
yeah, they make it difficult.
They make it so difficult for families to.
So are you in the camp? Are you in the camp that thinks that we should get paternity leave for fathers too?
Hey, if you want to give me 3 months paid off,
I know, but I would take it. But the people argue that I'm like, do you know? Like, have you had a kid? Do you know what happened? Like you were alluding to earlier, like if your wife's breastfeeding, it's like the husband's doing like basically nothing.
Oh yeah,
you're like just supporting and doing all the other stuff in the middle of the night if there's bottles and stuff. But usually they're still nursing, so it's like not a whole lot I could do in the first 3 months.
But dads, that's where you get to step up.
Yeah, on the other things.
Yeah, mom's exhausted.
Yeah, you do this, especially if you got other children. Like, you're handling all that stuff.
Clean up the house.
But there's a big
push. Couple meals.
There's a big push for the paternity stuff.
I don't fully get.
Yeah, I don't get that either. It's
I mean, don't get me wrong. My cousin got 3 months maternity leave, and he just took his family for like 6 weeks and went out to California.
Yeah, I bet.
I'm like, that's got to be nice.
Okay, yeah. We're going to work on some poetry or something. Yeah, right. Yeah, you're going to take a vacation or do something. Yeah. But hey, whatever role that you're trying to take, we should be encouraging traditional family structures in general. Like, hey, having family dinners together. We prioritize that in our house. Every day we have dinner together as a family. That's unheard of anymore. But that's an opportunity not for us to always obviously sit down and have a meal together, but it's to decompress the day, like to have communication, to know like, hey, what happened at school today? What did you learn? How did you do this? What's going on in your life? And to listen. Like that's rare now. Everyone's eating on the run, eating in front of they're at home, but everyone's eating their own meal in front of the TV. So-and-so's in the basement, so-and-so's upstairs. Like
So if you didn't have these things growing up, like I understand like life, everybody has their own story and their own experience of life and their own experience of relationships and of families. And we all, I mean, some of them are great, some of them are difficult. But again, if you live with God and you allow him to walk with you, you can be the point where that becomes a reality, where that change happens. So if you never had family dinners growing up, you can be the one that starts that tradition for your family moving forward. Yeah. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. It was excellent to have her around, but my dad worked, and he worked in the like 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night, 5, 6 days a week. So we didn't have those like traditional dad's home family dinners at 5, 6 o'clock. I'm fortunate enough where we can do that now. So a couple days a week. Yeah. Like you said, we try to prioritize it. We come together, we have dinner as a family. What does that teach my kids? It teaches them that we're going to come together as a family. We're going to ask about each other's days, and we're going to care about it. We're going to start with prayer. We're going to
turn the technology off and the TV off.
We're going to turn the tech off. We're going to set the table together. We're going to clean up together. Yes. We're going to, hopefully if we have time, we'll play a story or just do something as a family together. So we're not each in our own corner of the house or each off doing our own thing. So you can be that change if you didn't have it coming up.
Yeah. And it's only going to help. It's just, but it takes work. It's not easy to do it. It's like, but I think it does help. Like you said, that everybody plays a part in it. It isn't like just has to be like if your wife's working, that she's the only one who's got to do all the food and do all the stuff. Yeah. It's like, no, everybody at the end, we have our kids help us No one gets up from the table until everyone helps clear the table, put all the things away, clean up. And then they have to ask, like, may I be excused? This isn't just free for all. It's like, it isn't just, it's your house as well. It's like everybody, and it helps teach responsibility. And I think they enjoy it. They look forward to it. Yeah. And then on Sundays, we try to make it a little bit more special, like a roast or something like that. And I think too, we don't have much time, but I think part of not only that, the primary family, I think we've really lost the nuclear family and how important it was to have our cousins and our aunts and our uncles. And I know a lot of families are blessed where they live close, but we've lost that too. Because if mom was working, you had your aunt or your grandma, you had them there, and it really does help support because if mom's got to work, you have someone who cares about you. Your babysitters and your daycare, they don't care about you the way your aunt or your grandma or these people who are actually part of your family, the way that that's the way society's always was, is that now everyone's so moved far apart. Yeah. Everybody who always lived in the same neighborhood, where it's like if mom's got to work, then grandma's there or auntie or your cousin's going to pick you up, and they're looking out, just like they're standing.
We've lost that in the West, which we have to reclaim, because again, if we're going to live according to the principles that inspired us, the Judeo-Christian principles, then it's family centric, and we have to recapture it. There is the truth that because of the job markets the way they are, and because of the opportunities that people have, we're going to travel, we're going to disperse a lot more than we have traditionally. But I'm ethnically Middle Eastern, and so I still have family in Jordan and Palestine, Lebanon, and they still preserve those traditional modes of being family. And so I'll just point to, which is a very common example, point to my uncle. My uncle lives in a condo building in Jordan. He lives on the first floor. He built houses for both of his sons on the fourth floor, so they live across from each other. His daughter's like 15 minutes away by car. And that's very, very common. You don't leave your father's house until you get married. So it's very common to see like a 25, 30-year-old, you still live with your parents. That's the expectation. It's not like an expectation. That's just the norm. You wouldn't, like here, it's 18, okay, it's time to leave the house. No, there, you stay with your parents until you move into your own house and you start your own family. And even then, you're within proximity to each other. And so what does that look like? That means we're still having breakfast together. We're still having dinner with each other. If you have kids, grandma's right downstairs. Like this dependence on each other. And as mom and dad get older, grandma and grandpa get older, now you come into my house. I left your house when I got married. Now you need care. You come into my house. This idea of like nursing homes, that's a modern phenomenon. Yeah. Right? It's like we take for granted because they become part of our daily experience. You really only send mom or dad to a nursing home if they need intense regular care. Other than that, they're your responsibility. They're not
someone else's.
They're not someone else's responsibility. But again, it could be so complicated because we work so much here. I mean, you go like the Mediterranean cultures, you go to Spain, they don't work nearly as much as we do, right? They take siestas during the day. They start later in the day. And it's like, work is good. I like to work. I go crazy if I don't work. But it's also balanced with like, I have other responsibilities. Like we're getting out with the maternal care, and we got at with spending dinner with the family. And like those responsibilities are as important as the work that I put in. Because again, if we're looking at things from a societal perspective, then the family unit has to be invested in and cared for.
And that's where the evil one is attacking. And
that's where the evil one's attacking. I'm going to be a better colleague, coworker, supervisor, whatever it is, if I am also being the best dad and husband that I can be. Yeah. They inform each other.
Yeah, that's what the Blessed Mother told Sister Lucia at Fatima, is that the next greatest battle is going to be on the family. And that's what this, not just the primary family, but the nuclear family is that because of these demands of economics and keeping up with the Joneses, and we just need 2 incomes all the time and everyone's got to move around, that's that isn't how the Bible was set up. I mean, people were all living in the same neighborhood, same community, and it was like their clans. There were families, like Abraham's clan, like there was all extended family, and they just lived together and did life that way. Who else is going to care about you and your family more than your family? And
so just my one uncle, I've got 7 of them. His 2 brothers live in the same building, and his sons live in the building. And then the building next to them are his other brothers. And then 20 minutes away, he's got 2 other brothers. So like they're all, this idea of clan, I mean, shoot, if you took the buildings away and you moved them back 1,000 years, they'd be in huts and tents. Like that's what it was when you mention Abraham.
Yeah.
like these traditional values are still preserved in some parts of the world. It's really more in the developed, industrialized world where opportunity is plentiful, but we have to seek it out.
Yeah.
That we lose this sense of community and family.
Yeah, both my brothers, two of my brothers, they bought houses across the street from each other. But my youngest brother, he's got a son, and now he's seeing how important it is to have family that close. Because it's like, hey, you need help with your son, and it's like they got a pool. It's like every weekend, it's like not a party, but it's like a family get together, all the time. And it's only 20 minutes from us. And my mom, she lives, within 5 minutes. So, but I have a small family.
It's a
so
beautiful
it's like,
thing.
But it's nice. But like me, would I want to live on the same block? I love them, but they're a little too wild for me. I like being 15, 20 minutes
My
away.
dream would be to like have just 20 acres and to have my whole family.
Homestead?
Just like a homestead, a compound.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, that's Uncle so-and-so's house.
I just don't like all the neighbors
house.
all up in my business. They got to like my block, like people just kind of mind their own business. Like I have some people, but like if you pop out on their block, you pop out of the house, everyone's out. Everyone's like all up and down. It's just interesting. Because my brother's got a pool like in the summer now. It's like every day it's like the neighborhood is there. It's kind of funny, but.
So I live on I'm in a unique situation where a couple of the people that work in the parish, we all live on the same block. And I'm trying to bring like some regular neighborhood vibes because I live across the street from a school. So if you live near a school, like the school tends to dominate the neighborhood. So I try to put Christmas lights up.
Yeah, Khalil's house is nice.
Mike's going to step it up. Try to do some like neighborhood things.
We have like a big block party.
Yeah, we talked about doing a block party once.
It's hard though, like you said, like living next to the school, like the house right next to me is also a schoolhouse, and like the people that live across me don't really come out really ever.
No,
it's kind of weird. So,
well, we're so disconnected.
I yearn for that.
Yeah,
like you just know your neighbor and like, hey, what's up? And they watch out for each other. And
an old neighborhood back in Whiting was like that.
Yeah.
All the kids hung out. Everyone was at somebody's house doing party, whatever it is.
So we replaced that for Ring cameras on our doors.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Because that's what it used to be. That was secure. Like remember Neighborhood Watch?
Yeah.
Like you would just you knew who was on your block.
Right.
And you knew if a car was strange, and you knew if like, hey, they're having a party or they're out of town. What's going on over there? Like, so now that's just replaced with Ring cameras that Amazon and the NSA and whoever can just drop in whenever they want.
And no one knows each other.
It's not a healthy. Again, it's going back from like family as the societal unit to the individual. And when we break people down to the individual, you can silo them really easily.
And the question is it better or worse? It's obviously
worse.
It's obviously worse. It's like we need to reevaluate the way that we're doing things, and it takes courageous, bold people to say enough. Stop. Let's try to re-envision the way that we do school, the way that we do our blocks, the way that we do church. There should be more. Yes, we come to worship on Sundays, but how else are we living together? Like we just come in for an hour a week and just go to mass together. Like, are we doing other things? And that's what our parish is great about doing, is that there's a lot of opportunities to grow. Like we have a connect group, there's 25, 30 people, but it's all with the kids. So twice a month we get together. Ours is tomorrow. And we have to have 2 babysitters because there's so many kids running around. And now the weather's nice. They'll be outside. And the parents, we're talking about Jesus and we're praying and we're having a meal together, but we're having fun. And the kids are seeing that. It's like we're getting that feeling, which is cool.
We got to our generation, we got to live in both worlds.
Yeah.
I grew up in a world where like you just woke up in the morning. If there was no school, you had a quick bowl of cereal and you were out the door and you were gone until lunch.
And then come back
and then came back. You had lunch, and then you were gone again. And then streetlights brought you back home. And it's like mom didn't know where you were. You were on your bike. You were with your friends. You'd go to the park. You'd get into some trouble. Like, you'd have fun.
Yeah.
I
long for that.
I grew up in that time. I don't know if I could do that with my kids. Like, I want to see you all the time.
Yeah, see, that's what we're like, fighting right now.
It scares me.
Well, I'll ask you this one question. Do you know one person who's ever been kidnapped? Ever, that knows anybody who's ever been kidnapped?
You talk to Deacon Phil, he'll tell you a bunch of stories.
I understand those are stories, but do you know anybody in your whole entire life? You've been here for a long time and you know a lot of people. Has anyone you know ever been kidnapped? It's such like
can't think of
Of course you can't, because you'll hear the one story that gets really, not saying that it doesn't happen, but are we more safe or less safe now? It's like, so what we're trying to do as parents is that we're trying to keep our kids off the phones. But we're also at the same time, Jonathan Haidt's got a new book. He's talking about this anxiety problem.
Okay.
Is that for children, his suggestion is to not have any phones in the schools, to not give them cell phones until they're in high school, and no social media until they're at least 16. But you also have to give them more freedom. And the freedom, what we're trying to do, I mean, there's a balance between like free range parenting and like, being helicopter smothering gentle parents. It's like, so what we're doing, like we live
I'm like vibing right now. It's like a beautiful summer day.
Right?
Hey, Mike, can you grab 2 more of these?
Yeah.
We said we were going to wrap this up, but
but we're getting into topics I'm
we're
really
getting
excited
a roll.
about. So the free range.
We might have to get that light back on.
Yeah.
Well, working on, I don't have enough batteries.
That's all right.
That's all right. But so we live like 3 blocks away from a park. So it's like, it's a little ways from my house. My daughter's 10 and my son is 7. But it's like when I was a kid, when I was 10, I would go 2 or 3 towns over with nothing to worry about. Like, but now we have like, we didn't get my daughter a phone, but we got her like one of those watches where she could text us, where it's just for texting and we can see where she's at. So we're trying to give them more freedom to be able to be a kid. Like instead of trying to 24/7 be on top of them and not trusting them, and to let them learn a little bit.
So you let her go the 3 blocks?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she's been going. Her and her friend on a rollerblades, they go. And is it scary as a parent?
How old is she?
She's 10. She's going to be 11 in a couple weeks. But can she get kidnapped? Yes. Can things happen? Yes.
So I know where you're on. What side of it you're on? Where's Katie at?
She's on the same side.
Okay.
Yeah, so but it doesn't mean we're naive. Doesn't mean that we're not going to take due diligence. So I think part of the problem is that we can't just throw them to the wolves and say, just go. It's the Jesus model, which is I do, we do, you do. So first, I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm going to do it. Then you watch what we do. Then we do it together. And then you can go do it on your own. We have to also show them how to do it. Okay, look, making sure obviously you know how to cross the street or how to navigate certain things, and let them be prepared for things that could happen that's bad. But I don't think we're doing our kids any service by smothering them, gentle parenting, or to be on top of them. And if there are only excuses that, well, they're going to get kidnapped. Like we all turned out okay. We live in this one foot in the old world and the new world. And all the research is out. It's not making our kids any happier. 40% of kids are on seeing therapists. A lot of kids are on pills. It's like things are going to happen. Yes, some things we're not going to be able to avoid. Yes, some things would be smarter, but you're doing more damage than you are good by trying to erase all the struggle or all the tough things in their life or anything that could happen wrong. Because guess what? Things are going to happen whether you're there or not. You may be trying to get rid of some of them right now.
So again, I'm going to play devil's advocate here because it is a thought that I have.
Yeah.
So I trust my kid.
Yep.
All right. I taught them right. They're of age. Maybe they've got a little tracker watch, whatever. But it's other people that I don't trust.
Yeah, but.
And like is it just me or has the world just the number of
but like I said,
wackos just kind of like upticked?
Where's the evidence?
In the last generation.
But where's the evidence of that happening? So you still have to teach your kids on stranger danger. Hey, if someone comes up to you, what to do, how to handle certain situations. You're not just sending them out there without letting them know, like, these are some things that could happen. You're going to be on your bike. Hey, don't cross the street here and go there. And if someone's being weird at the park, then find how to find an adult, how to do those things. By teaching our kids to be soft isn't going to help them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not. I mean, whether that's, as parents, if our goal is to make our kids happy, we're never going to win. That's never number one. It's not a good goal. It's not going to happen. What happens?
It's a change of perspective. I'm not raising kids. I'm raising adults.
That's exactly what it is. So if they're 10, like when do you turn it up? How do you then eventually go to the next step to where I'm going to try to give you more responsibility and that I trust that you're responsible enough to do it, because it'll never be good. You'll never trust. The world's always going to be messed up. At what age is it all of a sudden, okay, when you got a driver's license, that's better with all the stuff? We should be teaching our children how to navigate these pitfalls.
I found pictures of my dad, and he was younger than me in the pictures. Dude looked like he was 50.
Yeah.
Like, you look at the previous generation or two, there was this footage, it was like 1911 or whatever. First like camera footage of like kids in New York. And these kids looked hardcore, just gnarled by life. And they were going to work at like 7 years old. There's this coddling that's that's kind of seeped in to the way that we parent, where I like the image that you use because I'm familiar with the helicopter image, but the Zamboni image of like, I've got to go ahead of my kids and make sure it's smooth paths, no obstacles. Like this coddling's come in where our kids are maturing a lot later.
To their
And
detriment.
society hasn't caught up. Like our laws haven't caught up. I didn't realize this until yesterday. The voting age used to be 21. It was amended and brought down to 18. But when it was brought down to 18, like kids were a lot more responsible. Like they were getting full, you worked your way through college. There was no such thing as grants and loans, and you had to work your way through college. They got married earlier, like responsibilities in life hit them earlier. They were a lot more mature than we were. You looked at like kids that would go through college, especially in the, I mean, now I'm going back, ways back, but you look 16th, 17th, 18th century, they're 16, 17 years old going through college. Like life just hit you a lot earlier because it had to. Again, if kids were working at 7, by the time they were 17, 18, they had a plethora of experience. But now you got 25, 30-year-olds.
So it's changed.
That are still struggling. I think it's
this gentle parenting.
Yeah.
We had Dr. Ray Guarendi on our podcast with Katie and I, and he calls them, I call them Zamboni parents, but he called them bulldozer parents. Like they bulldozed away, like if there's any kind of disagreement between friends in the neighborhood, they have to get in the middle of it instead of letting the kids how to interact socially with their friends and how to solve problems. They're going to have to figure out how to do that. If I step in every time they're fighting over the bike or a toy or something, that's not going to, it's not teaching them everything. If every time my daughter doesn't make a team or gets a bad grade and I go yell at the teacher like it's their fault, instead of like trying to help them how to cope and how to handle like, well, maybe we got to practice harder on this thing and you're not going to always be happy, but trying to let them not say, well, okay, well, you didn't get this, so let's take you 2 towns over to make you on this team. Like, no, we got to teach you how to work harder, how to persevere, how to have resilience, and how to have a growth mindset. But it isn't coddling. Jonathan Haidt wrote the other book, The Coddling of the American Mind. You
hear this all the time because your wife's a principal.
Yeah.
Listen, I love Catholic education.
Yes.
But I think that the culture's got to shift. You don't send your kids for an education. You send them, so you're going to send them to a Catholic school. And if you're going to spend the money because it's worth the money, you want your kids to get discipline, values, grounded in their Catholic faith. But also this like helicopter, Zamboni, bulldozing, whatever you want to call it, that exists now that didn't really exist prior.
Yeah. Every
little thing that your kid does, you want to jump in and defend them. And, if I got in trouble coming up and I came home with a teacher's note, you better believe I was getting in trouble again at home.
Well,
there was no phone call to the teacher. How dare you?
Never.
My kid said that it was another kid.
So the question is, why is that? It's like my mom and dad never called the principal once. My wife gets so many emails all the time. And
my mom used to get called by the principal.
Yeah, but
she never called the principal.
But it's like, I get it. Like we really want our kids to do better than we did. Yeah. But the way that we got to where we're at is not because our parents gave us everything that we wanted as much as we can now, because now parents are having kids later. We're having less kids and we're having them later. So when our parents, my mom was 16 and my dad was 18 when they got married. So they had me 2 years later. So my parents didn't have any money. They were struggling and trying to figure it out. But now like I got married when I was 30. So I was already a little bit more established. I got a little bit more financial. It's like
I heard Peterson talk about this.
Yes, exactly.
And he was saying that when you have kids younger,
yes,
it's actually to the benefit of the kid because a younger you is more willing to take risk.
Yes.
And so not just with yourself, you're willing to take risk with your kids. So you're willing to let your kid go out and explore and fall and stumble and pick themselves up.
Yes.
Yeah. The older you get, the more kind of adverse to risk you become by nature.
Especially that you're having less.
Yeah.
It's like I only have 1 or 2 kids. It's like we used to have 6 kids and the kids will help discipline each other. It's like now you have less kids. So it's like they're more fragile. It's like, well, I'm going to put all my energy into 1 kid or 2 kids versus like, well, I can't put all the energy in this one. I got the next one's coming up. So we have less kids. We're having them later. So, but we can't make our kids better by taking away the things that made us better. The things that made us better was going without sometimes. Hey, when I want something at the store and I'm crying to my mom, and she's like, well, we can't afford it. We can't have that. Okay, so how did I learn how to get it? I got a paper route. I had to get my own money. I had to learn how to get skills and how to save money or how to make extra money to get it. It taught me work ethic. It taught me these things, teach us things. But if every time they cry or scream or want something, we just hand it to them, you're not doing them a favor. As much as you think it's nice to do that, like, the birthdays and stuff like that. But if everything they want at any time, they can get on Amazon. I know kids get DoorDash. Like my nephew DoorDashed the milkshake to his house. Wait. You just got a milkshake delivered to the house, dude? He's like, yeah, my mom gave me money. I'm like, you DoorDashed the milkshake. I'm like, are you no, it's insane to me. It's like anything the kids want, they get an Amazon or DoorDash. It is like, is this making our kids happier?
Yeah.
I'm reading another book called now Bad Therapy. It's not. The kids are not happy. You think this would make them happy by giving every kid their whim? It's the same with God. Why does God not give us everything we want? He could. God could give us everything he wants. Why doesn't he give us everything we want in our heartstrings? Because it's maybe not the best thing for us all the time. Sometimes those lessons need to be, there has to be, lessons to be learned, and there has to be skills to be able to, when you get that thing, that it doesn't ruin you. If we always get what we want, then we don't appreciate things. We don't learn those lessons.
I saw you. There was a young girl yesterday or Sunday. She probably middle school age, maybe 7th, 8th grade. She was on the corner in the neighborhood. So I'm driving back. Oh, it's a Sunday because I'm driving back with my water gun artillery, me and Jacob.
Yeah.
And I make a turn into the neighborhood, and there's this young girl sitting there selling lemonade, which you don't see that often. Heck, if I see a kid playing outside, I give thanks to God. Like, oh, that's awesome. So I see this young girl selling lemonade, pull up to the intersection. I drive by her. She does see me, and I'm like, I'm not stopping. Like, it was an inconvenient place, right in the middle of a busy intersection. Like, I'm not going to stop for some lemonade. So I'm going down the block. I'm almost at the house. I make it to the house, but the whole time I felt this like tug on my heart, like, you should turn back. You should go back. You should go back. And just as we pull up to the house, Jacob goes, hey, Dad, why was she selling lemonade? And I'm like, oh, this is if I'm looking for a sign. So I turn around, go back to the girl selling lemonade. Jacob and I walk down and get to talking to her. Her mom's in the car off to the side. And it's like, she's doing what all kids ought to be doing. She wants to go to dance academy. And so she has to sell lemonade to make up her part of how much it's going to cost.
Yep.
And she told me that. I mean, I threw her $20 for 2 cups of lemonade, probably the most expensive lemonade I'll ever buy in my life. And I was so proud of her.
Yep.
And B, I was so grateful that my young, impressionable 4-year-old
you were able to teach a lesson.
Got to see that. And so like the whole car ride back, he's asking me, well, why is she selling lemonade? Well, buddy, because she wants to go to,
Yeah.
And then why do we need to work? And like, what is that why you and mom work? And well, I go to school now. Like what? So like those, if you open yourself up to those experiences and then you invite, in this case, like your kids into them, that's where you teach life lessons. Yeah. But if I just drove by or if I don't show my kid what it means to work or what it means to pay for things,
everything they want,
they just get, without having to understand how you get it, then what service am I doing to my kid? And what kind of, again, if we're raising adults who aren't there yet, what kind of adult, what kind of man is he going to be?
Yeah, I took that lesson from Patrick Bet-David did with his kids.
The Lego thing?
The Lego thing. So yeah, my son's into Legos and I'm into reading. And, it's one thing. It's one thing every time my son wants a Lego, if I just buy it for him, there's no value. They play with it, he puts it together, they don't play with it again. Yeah. But so what we've been doing, I've been having him go on Amazon, pick out the one that he wants, and then I put it on top of the refrigerator with how much it costs. And for how many books he reads, each book is like an AR, their accelerated reader, has a point system to it, and whatever it is, he has to get, every point is $1. So when he gets to, this last one was $53. So he got the $53 of books that he read, then he got the gift, but he saw it every day looking at it. He's like, okay, like, hey, why don't you go read? Okay, yeah. So he was working towards this. So now he got that one. He's like, okay, cool. He got the reward. He worked hard. And my daughter, she wanted, her stuff, she like markers but she's a little entrepreneur herself. She makes bracelets and she makes earrings and she'll sell them. She does the same thing. Because I don't just give her everything. Can I give her whatever she wants? Yes. But I'm not going to do that because it teaches those lessons, because our motto in our family is hard work. I go, hey kids, hard work. They're like, pays off. It's like hard work pays off. It's like there's the studies and the statistics are out for those things, is that if we just praise our children and just tell them, you're so smart, you're so beautiful, you're so great at this, you're just naturally good at this, you're good at this, that literally is setting them up for what they call a fixed mindset. But a growth mindset, and if you're interested in this, there's a couple good videos, Andrew Huberman and Carol Dweck. They're both from Stanford. And
Andrew Huberman got canceled. So
yeah, no, he's still good. He's just living the way the culture has said so, and now they're turning on him. So, but that growth mindset is that we're called to praise our children for their effort. If you have two groups of kids and they take a test and then they take the same test again, if you told the one group that you work really hard and you're good, we're so impressed how hard you work, and then you just tell the other group that you're just good at things, they do like 40% better on the second test. It's like, it's so crazy that we are supposed to emphasize their effort and what they put in. But we're not requiring our kids to have much effort. It's like, no, you're just so good. You're my kid. You're great the way you are. And what ends up happening is when it does get hard, they quit. But if they have a growth mindset of where we're praising how hard they work, I'm like, that's what we praise all the time. Like, you're so resilient. You never give up. Like, your grit. And that we're encouraging that things are going to be hard. But when you get there, we can do hard things. Like, that's our other thing, is like, no, we do hard things. And by doing hard things, they get better. And that's why this is a problem in our society, is that if we just hand them everything, or when I'm parenting and things get hard, if I'm going to go in front of them and get rid of the thing that's hard, like, no, the hard thing is what builds resilience and grit within them. And it teaches them a life lesson. Like, anything that's really good usually takes hard work. Sometimes you got to go over it. Sometimes you got to learn how to maneuver around it. Sometimes you got to go straight through it. And I'm not doing you any justice by taking that lesson away from you, or taking that hurdle away from you, and doing it myself. I'm stealing it from you.
You're not just, exactly. You're robbing them of the pride they take in themselves and in the work they could produce.
Especially when
that's where work becomes sanctifying.
Yes.
Like, that's something that we hold. Like, work can be a tool for holiness. And so when you work, you take this sense of not just pride in what you've produced, you take a sense of pride in yourself that I was able to commit. I was able to put in the effort. I helped make this thing. And that's why we've talked in our episode about art. Like, you go to Europe, these cathedrals, these monuments to God, people did it not just for God. They took pride in that they could do it for God. They took pride in themselves. This is what I helped make. This is what we as a community help build. Yeah. And so that applies to ourselves. Like, work hard, enjoy the process of working, and the outcome will be so much better.
Yeah, taking pride.
You'll be so much more prideful in a good way of what you've been able to produce. Don't rob your kids of that. No. Like, let your kids work hard. I mean, I'll give Jacob, just like we're doing math and subtraction, all that stuff, I'll give him a bunch of questions. I'll throw in a couple curveballs in there for him. They might stump him, but when he gets them, he just beams, because it's like, I was able to do it. I did it.
Yeah, and we learned that right away. Like, we read the book, Growth Mindset, my wife and I, from Carol Dweck, like when we first started parenting, was reading all the books. And I saw how that happened. Like, when Avery was in first grade, like, she was struggling with math. And we just emphasize so much how hard you work is going to help you get better. There's some things that, some people are naturally good at some things. We're not saying that is, but if you emphasize those things in your children, when it gets hard, they're like, well, I thought I was good at this. Now I'm not. They just give up and won't even try. Yeah. So instead, we've been pushing work hard, work hard. Now she's in high honors math. Now she was on the math bowl team. They won their district. She didn't miss one question in the thing. Like, now she's like, she takes pride in that. Like, she didn't get she'll get things wrong, and then she wants to figure it out. Not because she's naturally good at math, because of all the hard work that she put in. And we emphasize not how smart you are, but how hard you work. And it really does make a difference. Same with our son. It's like,
and do the hard work for the sake of doing good things.
Yes.
Not for the sake of accolades or
the process.
Accolades. It's like, no, I do it because it is good to do good things for the sake of the good. Like, I know it's a lot of goods, but that's really what it is. And that's what I love about St. Joseph. He lives a largely hidden life. And yet all he did was for good, for the sake of good, which produced good. Yeah. And it's like, that's the model that we ought to hold up as an example for us, not what kind of culturally has become the norm. you want to do things so you can get famous or you can get rich or you can get power, or you can get, attention, or you can get whatever it is. No, you just put in the work to do good work for the precise reason that it is good to do it, right? So whether it's at your job, be the best employee that you can be the best supervisor you can be the best colleague you can be. Whether it's at home, be the best husband you can be the best wife you can be. Wake up early, make a pot of coffee for your wife. Like, just do the good for the sake of doing the good, and for nothing else.
And it takes courage, though, to do these things, because the culture is not doing them. Doing the things like different, like me not giving my daughter who's in 5th grade a cell phone. It's like, she's like, Dad, you're so strict. Maybe I'm a little bit more. No, I know the statistics. I know the studies. I'm smarter than, not saying other parents are stupid, but like, I'm just not going to choose that. It's just, I'm going to wait until she's like, she's in high school. It's not necessary. The other kids I'm watching, them, like my kids, they love to play outside. Like they're not outside. Like as soon as they get home, they're outside. Like we had like a swing, we got a trampoline, they got rollerblades. Like they love to be outside. Like, you're not going to be on video games. You're not going to be playing outside, but they sure want to. My son really wants to play Minecraft. He'll go to his friend's house and play it. And that's kind of like his little loophole, Like, I got to limit that. But I'm not going to be that guy who's going to say, like, pacify them and let them do what they want. And you're going to have to face some of that resistance from them because their friends or other classmates or people, they're not going to be doing the things that we're doing.
That's the fine line that you have to walk, because you don't want to completely shut them down.
Yes.
Because
they'll be sneaky.
They'll be sneaky and then they'll rebel.
Yeah.
So it's all, again, that's where relationship's important.
Yeah.
If you develop a relationship with your kids where like, I need to withhold here, I need to be a little lax here, I need to,
especially
I'm trying
in
to be
our
your
faith
friend.
stuff is even more.
Yeah.
Like think about the faith stuff. It's like, no, we're going to go to church every Sunday. Oh, I got sports. They got a tournament on here. They want to go do this. Like, no, we don't do those kinds. It's like, on top of just being a good parent and doing what you're supposed to do, we're going to have to live differently in the world, to not be of the world. It's like, but you got to be willing to deal with some discomfort, especially in parenting with your kids, because you don't ever want to see your kid unhappy. But the point is for them to be holy, not to be happy. I mean, God bless all the times that they are full of joy, but my goal is to make them
I'm okay
saints.
with seeing my kid wrestle and struggle through things.
Well, his name is He Who Wrestles with God, right?
That's a good point.
That's part of it. It's like it's in his name, and so we've made that a big part of our lives. Is like, no, like Avery, but it could backfire. Like we try to make her really resilient, but it could be used for like being resistant.
A little attitude, yeah.
She could be resistant, it could be really used because she doesn't give up. She knows, we always tell her, like, you're the kind of person that doesn't give up. So she won't give up if she doesn't get her way. But we have to have a united front where we're like, no, we're together on this and this is what it is. And
well, if people want to hear more of this, they got to check out the Catholic Couple.
Catholic Couple, yeah. We had a good one with Dr. Ray. It was
Catholic Couple 1 on Instagram.
Yeah.
And then I think you guys got the YouTube channel too.
We do.
Check it out.
We're actually doing
more
one
family
today.
And marriage stuff.
I got 2 hours or an hour episode after this with Katie tonight on perfectionism. We're going to do.
Oh, really?
Which is another conversation, which is super hard to try not to be perfect at everything. So that's coming up.
I have a feeling she struggles with that more than you do.
Big time. Yeah, she's there's some literature on that. There's 2 kinds of perfectionism. We're going to unpack that. One that's adaptive and one that's maladaptive. There's good to have high standards. There's another one to where it's crippling. And so, yeah, we're going to unpack that.
You guys need a moderator for that conversation.
I know, right?
Maybe show up.
Yeah, right. I might need it. No, yeah, I feel pushback already.
Wow, we really went around the world with this one.
Yeah.
Good.
What did we do? Like, we did Iran, we did Australia, we did the Israel situation.
Podcast, yeah.
Was it really?
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for tuning in, guys.
We might have to bring it in.
Yeah, we like to have fun. It's summer, so Bobby got us a couple drinks, which is, I think, would help lubricate the second half of the conversation.
Yes, it does. It definitely helps, for sure.
We're on Instagram and on YouTube, so check us out. I was going to say Catholic Couple.
Purposely
Catholic. Take care. God bless.
iTunes. You guys are listening.
Spotify and iTunes.